I wouldn't have said so, no. Not really. But no, I don't get the feeling that she's wildly optimistic about life. A pragmatist, I think.
The state dinner was meant to be a night of polished smiles, golden protocol, and royal calm. Instead, one chair became the center of a storm. When Camilla arrived expecting her place beside the king, the room had already shifted. Anne had been moved into the queen's seat, and in that single, silent arrangement, the palace delivered a message no one could ignore. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla stopped before she reached the table. Her smile stayed in place, but only just. The queen consort had walked in believing the evening would confirm her standing beside Charles, not question it in front of everyone who understood royal signals. A state dinner, in simple terms, is a formal meal held by the monarchy for important national or foreign guests, and every seat inside that room carries meaning. Placement shows rank. Placement shows trust. Placement tells people who stands closest to power when the world is watching. Charles saw her notice it. He did not rise quickly. He did not give her an explanation. The king simply held his stillness, and that stillness cut deeper than anger. So Camilla looked toward Anne, and the Princess Royal gave nothing away. She sat where the queen's seat should have placed Camilla, calm and exact, as if the decision had already been settled long before the first guest entered. In royal protocol, meaning the rules and customs that guide royal behavior, a chair is never just furniture. That night, it became a verdict. Anne knew the weight of the place she occupied. She did not look triumphant, and that made the moment even colder. Camilla understood then that she was not facing a mistake, a delay, or some awkward confusion from the household. She was facing a planned arrangement. A senior courtier moved quietly near the table, lifted the original place card meant for her, and replaced it without a word. That small motion made the humiliation complete. No announcement, no raised voice, just paper moved by a careful hand, and a royal position changed in silence. William watched from across the room. The prince saw Camilla's face tighten, saw Charles avoid the first question in her eyes, and saw Anne remain steady beside the monarch. He understood what others were only beginning to feel. This dinner was no longer about diplomacy, ceremony, or polished royal duty. It was about who could be trusted near the center when pressure rose. It was about succession, survival, and the hidden fear that the monarchy was preparing for something far larger than one uncomfortable evening. And before anyone could understand why Anne had been elevated, the palace had to reveal who truly stood to lose the most. At the center of the room sat Charles, trapped between loyalty, duty, and the cold machinery of monarchy. On one side stood Anne, steady and unreadable, carrying the weight of a lifetime spent serving without asking for applause. On the other stood Camilla, wounded by a decision that did not just move her chair. It questioned her place in the royal story. Charles felt the pressure before anyone spoke. The king knew this was not only about one dinner or one awkward seating change. A monarch, in plain words, is the person who carries the crown and represents the country through royal duty, and that duty can turn private pain into public command. He had to protect confidence in the palace while sitting near the woman who expected his protection most. Camilla looked toward him once, waiting for even the smallest sign that he understood her humiliation. He gave her almost nothing. That silence told her the decision had gone deeper than she feared. Anne remained still beside him. She did not act proud, but she did not shrink either. The Princess Royal had spent decades being useful without demanding the spotlight, and that made her sudden place beside Charles feel powerful. Her elevation did not look like decoration. It looked like trust. Camilla saw the servants follow the new arrangement without hesitation, and the queen consort felt the sting of it. No one stumbled. No one apologized. No one seemed confused. That meant the order had been prepared, accepted, and carried out before she entered the room. William watched every movement from across the table. The prince noticed how Charles avoided Camilla's eyes, how Anne stayed calm, and how Catherine quietly studied the change, as if reading a message hidden in plain sight. The Princess of Wales understood what the room was saying. This was not only a wife being moved. This was a royal signal. And a royal signal means a public action meant to show who has influence, who has trust, and who has lost ground. Catherine looked at Anne again and realized the trusted sister was not simply filling a chair. She was holding a line. Camilla steadied her glass with both hands. The queen consort tried to keep her face smooth, but the wound had already reached her. Charles could feel it, yet the king still did not undo what had been done. Anne's presence beside him grew heavier with every minute, not because she demanded power, but because her calm made Camilla's discomfort impossible to hide. William leaned back slightly, already sensing the deeper question moving through the room like a cold warning. Who had convinced Charles that Anne had to replace her? The answer did not begin at the dinner table. It began with a private incident the palace had tried to bury. Every royal rupture has a moment everyone later remembers. For this one, it was not a grand speech or a public scandal. It was a closed-door conversation 3 weeks earlier, inside a private reception room at Windsor, when Camilla challenged Anne over who should stand beside Charles during a diplomatic event, and the room went silent before the damage was done. Camilla had not entered that room looking for war. She believed she was defending her place beside the king, and to her, that place mattered, because a consort is the monarch's spouse who supports the crown in public life. She felt that standing near Charles during a diplomatic gathering was not vanity. It was proof that she still belonged at the center of the royal story. Anne saw it differently. The Princess Royal heard the challenge and understood it as something sharper than irritation. To her, Camilla was not protecting duty. She was demanding position. Anne did not soften her reply. She told Camilla that the crown needed steadiness more than comfort, and the queen consort felt the words land like a public slap, even though only a few people heard them. A diplomatic gathering, in simple terms, is a formal meeting with important foreign guests, where royal behavior sends political and personal messages. That was why the argument mattered. Charles could not afford confusion around him. Anne knew that. Camilla knew it too, but she believed loyalty to the king should have protected her from being questioned. Charles heard about the exchange later, through a documented palace account prepared for his private briefing. The king read the note once, then set the folder down without speaking. That silence frightened the aide more than anger would have. Charles understood what the confrontation meant. This was no longer a small dispute between two royal women. It was a warning that personal pride could break through the calm surface of monarchy at the exact moment the palace needed control. William was told soon after. The prince listened carefully as the private protocol note was summarized to him, and he did not rush to defend anyone. A protocol note is a written palace record used to track matters that could affect royal order, seating, or public roles. That made the document dangerous. It turned Camilla's challenge into something official. It gave Anne's concern weight. It gave Charles a reason to act. William's quiet response showed he understood the seriousness at once. Camilla did not yet know how deeply that room had changed her future. She still believed the moment could be forgotten, folded away, buried under polite smiles and royal routine. But Anne remembered. Charles remembered. William remembered. And when the state dinner seating was later reviewed, that private confrontation became the hidden spark no one could ignore. When the truth finally reached her, Camilla did not wait for another whisper. She went straight to the person she believed had betrayed her. The most dangerous royal battles are not fought in public. They happen in quiet rooms, where every word lands like a blade. After the dinner seating was confirmed, Camilla found Anne in a private corridor, away from guests, music, and ceremony. There were no cameras, no advisors, and no soft escape. Only two women, one chair, and a lifetime of buried tension. Camilla did not wait for Anne to speak first. The queen consort stepped closer and asked whether the Princess Royal had supported the seating change, because by then the decision was no longer rumor or confusion. The seating plan, in plain terms, was the official order showing where each guest would sit during the state dinner. And in royal life, it could expose who held influence before a single speech was made. Camilla knew this. Anne knew it too. That was why the silence between them felt so dangerous. Anne did not deny it. She held Camilla's stare and admitted she knew the arrangement had been reviewed. The answer hit harder because it came without cruelty. No victory, no apology, just certainty. Camilla said the move made her look weak beside Charles, and for the first time that night, the pain broke through her control. She had fought for years to be accepted near the king, and now one chair had made the whole room question whether she still belonged there. Anne remained calm, and that calm unsettled Camilla more than anger ever could. The Princess Royal told her that the crown could not be protected by appearances alone. The crown, simply explained, means the monarchy as an institution, not just the person wearing the crown. That mattered because Anne was not speaking as a rival. She was speaking as someone who believed duty had to come before pride. Camilla heard the message clearly, and it wounded her, because part of her feared it was true. Camilla asked if Anne had pushed Charles into it. The Princess Royal answered with a line that changed the whole confrontation. She said she had not campaigned for the seat. The king had offered it after reviewing the Windsor incident and the protocol warning. A protocol warning is a formal palace concern raised when someone's role or behavior may affect public order. That meant the decision had not been born in jealousy. It had come from the top. Anne then said, "Loyalty is measured when no one is clapping." Camilla went still. The queen consort understood the force of those words, because they accused her without naming the accusation. She had wanted recognition. Anne had offered steadiness. She had wanted reassurance. Anne had offered service. For one long moment, Camilla had nothing sharp enough to throw back. And Camilla walked away with her pride bruised and her anger redirected. She now knew Anne had taken the seat, but had not stolen it. The true authority belonged somewhere else. And that realization made the next door feel even heavier. Because Anne may have taken the seat, but the authority to move it belonged to Charles alone. Charles did not raise his voice. He did not summon the household with fury or announce a punishment. He made the decision in the way monarchy often makes its most brutal choices, with a pen, a pause, and a silence no one dared interrupt. The order to place Anne beside him was not an accident. It was the king choosing trust over comfort. Charles sat with the final seating plan in front of him, and the weight of it pressed harder than any speech. The seating plan, in simple words, was the official list showing where each guest would sit. But inside palace life, it was also a map of power. Anne's name had been marked beside him. Camilla's name had been moved. The king understood exactly what that meant. It would tell the household that trust had shifted. It would tell guests that something had changed. And it would tell Camilla that her place beside him was no longer untouchable. Charles hesitated before signing. The monarch was not blind to the pain waiting inside that decision. Camilla had stood beside him through years of judgment, and moving the queen consort from that seat would feel like a private wound made public. Yet the king also knew why the choice mattered. The diplomatic night needed calm. The monarchy needed order. The Windsor confrontation had shown him that the wrong tension near the center could turn ceremony into distraction, and he could not let that happen. William entered during the final review, and stopped when he saw his father's hand resting heavily on the paper. The prince did not need a full explanation at first. He saw Anne's name. He saw Camilla's reassignment. He saw the decision already half made before a word was spoken. Charles finally looked up and explained, through a private palace conversation later recorded in a documented household account, that Anne had become the one person he trusted to steady the room under pressure. The king did not say it with pride. He said it like a man admitting something painful, because duty left him no softer option. William listened carefully. The future king understood that this was not about favoring a sister over a wife. Anne represented reliability at a moment when confidence inside the palace had become fragile. Camilla represented loyalty to Charles. But after Windsor, the monarch feared her presence beside him could pull attention toward personal hurt instead of royal unity. That difference mattered. A state dinner could shape public confidence, because every gesture was studied, every seat was read, and every silence could become a message. Charles picked up the pen. The room seemed to tighten around that single movement. He approved the order, and with it, the palace machinery began to turn. Staff adjusted place cards. Courtiers passed instructions in quiet voices. No one made it dramatic, and that made it even more brutal. The decision moved through the household before Camilla fully understood it, and by the time the evening began, her place had already changed in everyone's mind. And when the palace machinery started turning, Camilla felt the consequences before the guests even lifted their glasses. The dinner continued, but nothing felt normal. Every smile looked sharper. Every pause carried a second meaning. Camilla sat farther from Charles than expected, close enough to be seen, yet far enough to feel the message. Anne remained beside the king with calm discipline, and that calm became its own kind of thunder across the room. Camilla forced her smile as the first course moved forward. The queen consort knew guests had begun to notice the seating arrangement, and a seating arrangement, in plain words, is the planned order of who sits where during an official event. In royal life, it matters because it tells people who is trusted, who is honored, and who has been pushed away from the center. That was why every glance hurt. That was why every quiet pause felt like judgment. Camilla was not just sitting in a different chair. She was sitting inside a message everyone could read. Anne spoke quietly to Charles, and the room seemed to lean toward them. The Princess Royal did not raise her voice, yet her place beside the king gave every word more weight. Camilla tightened her fingers around the stem of her glass and tried not to show the pain. Palace staff moved carefully around her, avoiding eye contact as they served the table. Their caution made the humiliation worse, because servants inside the royal household are trained to protect calm. When they looked nervous, it meant the shift had become impossible to hide. Charles remained composed, but his mask was not perfect. The king glanced toward Camilla for one brief second, and guilt moved across his face before he buried it again. He understood what the night had done to her. He also understood why he had allowed it. Anne was steady beside him, and that steadiness mattered, because a state dinner is not only a meal, it is a public test of royal control, where foreign guests, senior aides, and the wider palace all watch for signs of weakness. Charles needed calm, and Anne gave him exactly that. Catherine noticed it before most others could name it. The Princess of Wales studied how courtiers moved around Anne, how Charles listened when she spoke, and how the whole room seemed to settle near her. William leaned toward Catherine and said in a low voice that this was not really about dinner placement. The prince understood the deeper truth. This was about who the monarchy trusted in a moment of pressure. Catherine looked back toward Camilla and felt the sadness of it, because the queen consort was still present, still smiling, and yet somehow already outside the center. Camilla heard the final toast and felt something inside her harden. The queen consort was no longer only fighting the chair, she was fighting what it represented. Anne had not mocked her, Charles had not attacked her, William and Catherine had not exposed her. But together, the room had shown her a painful new reality. Trust had moved, and everyone had seen it move. But the night's true turning point did not happen in front of the guests. It happened afterward, when two voices finally spoke without the palace between them. After the doors closed and the ceremony faded, Camilla faced the one conversation she could no longer avoid. There were no aides now, no polished table, no watching guests. Only Charles, tired and silent, and the woman who had stood beside him through years of judgment. For the first time that night, the wound was not political, it was personal. Camilla stood before Charles and waited for him to speak. The queen consort had held herself together through the dinner, through the glances, through the careful movements of staff who knew too much and said too little. Now she wanted one answer from the king. She asked if he still trusted her. The question hung between them because trust, inside a marriage, can mean love, loyalty, and years of shared pain. But trust inside monarchy means something colder. It means who can stand nearest the crown when pressure comes. Charles looked at her with exhaustion in his face. The monarch knew the seating change had humiliated Camilla, and he did not pretend otherwise. A seating change, in plain words, is when a person is moved from one assigned place to another, but in royal life, it can become a public signal of lost confidence. That was why the queen consort felt exposed. That was why the king could not call it harmless. He had moved her away from the center, and everyone who understood royal order had felt the meaning. Camilla pressed him again, and this time Charles answered with a truth that hurt more than silence. He told her that trust in marriage and trust in monarchy were not always the same thing. The words struck her hard. She had expected regret, maybe even an apology, but not that dividing line. The king was saying he could still care for her, and still believe the crown needed distance. He could still remember what they had survived, and still decide that Anne was safer beside him when the room demanded steadiness. Charles then admitted what Camilla had feared. The Windsor confrontation had changed everything. He had read the documented household account, spoken privately with advisors, and reviewed the protocol warning that followed. A protocol warning is a formal concern raised when palace behavior may affect public order or royal roles. To the king, that warning meant the institution had to come first. Camilla wanted him to protect her pride. Charles believed he had to protect the monarchy before pride could damage it further. Camilla fell quiet. The queen consort finally understood that Anne had not been the enemy of the night. The Princess Royal had become the symbol of a standard Camilla had failed to meet in that moment. Anne had not begged for the seat. She had not celebrated the wound. She had simply stood where Charles believed steadiness belonged. Camilla left without slamming the door, and that quiet exit carried more pain than any outburst. Charles remained behind, knowing he had kept control of the monarchy but wounded the woman beside him. By morning, the private humiliation had become a public image, and Britain saw the chair before it heard the explanation. The next morning, the monarchy woke to one image splashed across the country. Anne seated beside Charles, composed and immovable, while Camilla appeared several places away from the center of power. It was not the loudest royal scandal, but it was one of the clearest. Britain did not need a palace statement. The seating plan had already spoken. Camilla saw the front page before anyone could soften it for her. The queen consort sat at breakfast, looked down at the printed headline, and stopped moving. The queen's seat taken, stretched across the page, and beneath it was the image that turned private pain into public judgment. A front page, in simple words, is the main page of a newspaper, and it matters because it tells the public what story should dominate the day. Camilla pushed the paper aside without finishing her tea, but the damage had already entered the room. Anne stayed silent as the story spread. The Princess Royal did not rush to defend herself, and she did not turn the moment into victory. Her silence made the image even stronger, because people could read discipline into it. Broadcasters framed the state dinner as a public demotion, and palace aides tried to call it a matter of protocol. Protocol means the official royal rules for behavior, rank, and ceremony. But that explanation sounded too small for what everyone had seen. Camilla had not just been moved. She had been shown outside the center. Charles understood the danger by mid-morning. The king watched aides move quickly through briefings, but he did not issue a correction. That choice mattered, because a palace correction can reduce a story before it grows, and his refusal allowed the picture to stand. Anne remained composed, Camilla remained wounded, and the monarchy allowed the public to study the distance between them. Every hour without denial made the seating arrangement feel less like an accident and more like a message approved from the top. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates. Some called Anne's place a sign of discipline. Others called Camilla's removal a betrayal. One broadcaster described the image as a quiet royal earthquake, and that single phrase spread fast because it captured what people felt. No shouting, no scandalous recording, just one chair, one photograph, and a nation watching the balance of trust change in public. William read the coverage beside Catherine and chose his words carefully. The prince told her that the monarchy now had only two choices: defend Camilla and weaken the signal, or let the image stand and accept the consequences. Catherine looked at the headline again and understood the cost. Anne had become the face of steadiness. Camilla had become the face of correction. Charles had become the man who allowed the world to see both. And by the end of the day, the meaning of Anne's seat became impossible to deny. In the end, the chair was never only a chair. It was a verdict. It showed who Charles trusted when the room mattered most. It showed Anne's quiet power after decades of service. It showed Camilla the cost of being near the crown without fully commanding its confidence. And it showed the monarchy that loyalty, once questioned, can be rearranged in public. Charles allowed the image to stand. The king did not correct the newspapers, did not soften the palace whispers, and did not pretend the state dinner arrangement had been a harmless mistake. A state dinner arrangement, in simple words, means the planned order of seats and roles during a major royal meal with important guests. In monarchy, that matters because every place shows rank, trust, and public meaning. Charles knew the world had understood the message. Anne had been placed beside him because steadiness mattered more than comfort, and the monarch chose not to hide that truth. Anne did not celebrate what had happened. The Princess Royal returned to duty with the same calm discipline that had made Charles trust her in the first place. She did not treat Camilla's pain as victory, and she did not turn the moment into personal triumph. That restraint became part of the final message. Anne had not seized power. She had been trusted with responsibility. The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution rather than only the physical crown, had needed someone steady beside the king, and she had answered without demanding praise. Camilla accepted the humiliation because fighting it would only deepen the wound. The queen consort understood that the public image could not be erased by anger, and the chair could not be reclaimed by complaint. She had not been removed from royal life, but she had been corrected in front of the people who knew how to read the signs. That was the painful difference. Camilla still had her title, her history, and her place beside Charles in private. But at that dinner, she learned that closeness to the king did not always mean control over the monarchy. William and Catherine saw the lesson clearly. The prince understood that future royal power would belong to those who protected the institution without asking for constant reassurance. The Princess of Wales understood it too, and Catherine watched the fallout with quiet seriousness, because this was not only about Camilla or Anne. It was about the next chapter of the monarchy. It was about who could stand near pressure without turning pressure into drama. It was about service, strong enough to survive silence. Charles carried the personal cost alone. The king had wounded Camilla, but he had steadied the crown. He had elevated Anne, but he had also exposed the fragile line between family love and royal duty. By the end, the verdict was clear and complete. Camilla was not erased, but she was corrected. Anne did not take power. She was trusted with it. And Charles proved that monarchy survives by making painful choices in public silence. There was no unresolved mystery left. The state dinner became the night the crown reminded everyone that position is given, trust is earned, and even the queen's seat can be moved when duty demands it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.